What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Dipped in Tone. This is our first episode of Dipped in Tone 2.0. So if you missed the announcement on the channel a few weeks ago, we have officially partnered up with our friends over at Premier Guitar to sort of rework the show, make it bigger, better, faster, stronger, more consistent, much more consistent.
That's right.
That's
the biggest thing.
Yeah, we heard you. We heard your complaints. And the good news is it only took partnering with a major guitar media organization to make us post regularly. So, you know. But yeah, so anyways, some things that are going to be changing around here for the better. We're going to be posting, what is bi-weekly? Is that twice a month? Is that what you call it?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So bi-weekly.
2 times a month.
2 times a month. And we're starting with this episode. Well, actually, let me back up and say, so the plan is to bring more guests onto the show, and we have a guest lined up for this show. Some guy named Joe something.
Yeah.
Joe Bonamassa, something like that. And then we're going to basically alter each week. So we're going to have guest episode, regular old Rhett and Zach episode, guest episode, so on and so forth. That's the plan.
Yeah. For right now. So
we'll
see. We'll see how many guests we can get. How many people are interested?
Yeah, we may only have 2 or 3 people interested, in which case we'll just go back to how it was before in the before times. So
it's going to be great.
It's going to be great. But yeah, we're really excited to be working with Premier Guitar on this. And before we jump into Zach and I catching up, we have our very first ad read. And
Yay.
The sponsor of today's episode is StewMac. You've used StewMac before, right, Zach?
I have. Working in a guitar store, I think, I don't know if there is more of a gold standard for guitar repair equipment than StewMac. Basically, if you need to work on an instrument, they have every tool to do that and all the specialized tools to get the job done the right way the first time, instead of, fumbling through and trying to make things work with whatever you have laying around. StewMac probably makes a tool to fix whatever ails your instrument or whatever modification or repair you're trying to do.
Yeah, and as a non-luthier, I can say I appreciate StewMac's YouTube channel for all of the Dan Earlywine videos that I've binged over the years.
Yes.
Actually, a friend of the show, Chris Alvarado from Driftwood Guitars. Chris and Matt are going to be picking up some video work over there with the StewMac crew. So yeah. So
basically, StewMac have way more than just guitar repair stuff too. They have pickups, they have all the electronic stuff for doing modifications, and then they also now have kits for making amps and pedals. So if you're looking to dip your toe in that world, you can do that right from StewMac. So.
Nice. I see what you did there. Good job.
Mm-hmm. You see it?
I actually used years and years ago. Oh man, this is a deep cut. I didn't think about this until just now. Some of the first YouTube videos I ever made back in like 2013, I want to say, I finished a Tele. They're not up on my channel, so don't go looking for them. I took them down. They're terrible. But I made a sunburst Tele from like a maple cap Tele body that I got on Craigslist in a trade. And I used the StewMac Sunburst kit. And I actually have to say, for someone, I'm not a finisher at all. I'm terrible with that kind of work, but it actually came out pretty nice. It's all nitro. It was a nice little 3-tone Sunburst. It was great.
I think everyone would like to see that. But for Dipped in Tone listeners, you can go to stewmac.com/dippedintone, get a nice little discount. All the details are there on the webpage. So if you're interested, go check it out.
Yeah, and thanks to StewMac for sponsoring the first episode of Dipped in Tone 2.0. That's what we're officially calling it now.
Yeah.
All right, so Zach, what's been going on? We've been off the air for like 6 weeks. What's new?
Well, so much. So Mythos is moving. I have secured a new shop, and we are venturing out on our own. I needed more space. I need room to grow. I need room for this and doing more video stuff where I'm not like having to worry about bothering poor Devin, who has to suffer through all these gigantic amps being cranked all the time and stuff. So that's happening when this goes out, it's happening this week. We'll be loading a truck and moving and setting up the new shop. So it's absolutely terrifying. It's very stressful. I don't know how to go about changing all my LLC addresses and like everything I had to do with the state to make this thing legitimate. Now I have to change it all again, but it's good and super excited. But that's the biggest thing. As
your partner on the podcast and your emotional support fellow podcaster, I can tell you that you probably should be scared because the amount of stuff that you're going to have to pack up. I mean, I was at the shop this past weekend and just walking around, there's a lot of knobs, a lot of pedal cases, a lot of components.
I mean, there's thousands and thousands of things. Tens of thousands of just bits and bobs and stuff. So yeah, and it's all heavy. Like our shelves are heavy, our workbenches are heavy, and they're all huge. They all have to go through a normal sized door. But luckily the new shop has a dock, and I'm gonna get a big truck and we'll just put stuff on pallets, roll it right on the truck, roll it back off, and should save our backs a little bit of pain.
And we all know the real reason that you're moving is just because the new shop has better internet. That's really it.
Well, it's going to have really good internet, and the warehouse is air conditioned, so that's pretty sweet.
Nice. Okay.
That's pretty cool.
So y'all go out and buy some Mythos pedals to support Zach's move because he's going to need it.
Please and thank you.
Yeah.
But what about you?
Just here making YouTube videos.
Shared your amp.
Yeah, we released the amp. So the day we're filming this, we released the amp yesterday, and I believe we sold all 10. I think so. Last time I checked, yeah, I think we just sold all 10. So we talked about it on the show before. Port City, we called it the Grandville, and it's based off of a 1951 Gibson GA50T, an amp that I played on the Roofman record last year in Hamburg, and yeah, I honestly could not be happier with how this amp came out. It is sitting right over my shoulder here. I should have brought it up actually last week and had you play it, but
you should have brought a lot of things. That Les Paul, you got a Les Paul.
God, that hasn't happened since the last time we taped either.
No, and we gotta get your plastic game up because.
Oh come on, no we don't. I know I still have those barf smelling plastics in my my. Wait, we haven't talked about this in the podcast yet, have we?
No.
Yeah, so this is the 1999 R9 that I bought from Uncle Norm at Norm's Rare Guitars with the help of one Tim Pierce. And this is one of the best Les Pauls I've ever played, including like real bursts. This thing is the real deal. What needs to change plastic wise though? I feel like these look right.
Well, I'm just, but that era of Gibson's custom shop, like the height of the pickup ring is a little off. The color of the plastic's all kind of funny to me. Anyway, they didn't really get that right until about 2015, 2016. But I don't know. To me, it's like, I mean, when you see so many of them, you're cursed with knowledge. You see how things are shaped and the hues things are supposed to be, and all that stuff just becomes like, so for me anyway, it becomes like locked in my brain and I can't unsee it. And when I see a guitar that's supposed to be that, I'm like, well, let's just change that stuff and make it look more like it. Cause it's all, it's just unscrewed. It's fine. But no, I'm excited to play it. Cause me, I am convinced that I have the best Les Paul ever.
I don't think you do anymore. No, I genuinely don't. I think this I'm going to fall in the steps of commenter on one of my YouTube videos, like, oh dude, I got an Epiphone Les Paul that'll smoke that thing. It'll smoke any Les Paul out there, dude.
We'll say.
Yeah,
I think we have very different tastes in Les Pauls anyway. So
yeah, but anyways, yeah, Grandville, it's out. Unfortunately, there's no more available. We only did 10 in this first run. I think we're gonna do a second run early next year, but stay posted for that. I couldn't be happier with the amp. It's amazing. That Les Paul through that amp, it absolutely kills. I love it. Totally love it. So, all right. Speaking of rigs, we're dipping a rig today. Actually, we're doing something a little bit different. So,
yes.
Before we get into this rig, if you're new around these parts, we on every episode dip a rig. Now, up until this episode, it's always been a patron, someone who watches the show and is part of our Patreon, which link down below if you want to join the Patreon.
And that's going to be updating soon as well.
Yeah. Well, it should already be updated by now, right?
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, so it's updated by now.
It's going to be updated.
New Discord server, all new things are happening. But this week, we decided as a way to kick off 2.0, we would dip a celebrities rig that Premier Guitar just ran in a rig rundown. I believe that video just went up recently, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Like in the past couple days. And cool. You wanna throw it up there, Zachary?
Well, with the new power of editing, it'll just be here now. So we've got Chris Shiflett's rig from the Foo Fighters. Chris is awesome, incredibly nice guy, and he's got quite the collection of stuff. And I don't know if we're going to hit everything, but we're going to get some highlights here. So I think we should start at the first guitar in this rig rundown on PremierGuitar.com.
And Chris, we're dipping your rig, so you have to come on the show. This is
that's right.
This is the deal that you didn't know you signed up for, but here we go. All right, so yeah, this first guitar on PremierGuitar.com, it's all that glitters is gold. This is a 57 conversion, right? You want to explain what that is?
Well, it's a stripped 57. I don't know. I guess.
Oh yeah. Well, I guess it wouldn't. Yeah, it's not really a burst, so it's just stripped. See the nice 3-piece top there.
Yeah, so it's a 57 gold top that the gold paint has since been removed, and you can see the multiple piece top, two of which are extra flamey, and then down near the control knobs it's pretty plain. But man, what a cool looking guitar. Up until May or so of 1958, all of Gibson Les Pauls were gold, and a lot of them had 3-piece tops. Or if they had a 2-piece, they might not be center seam. But this one he got from his big Reverb store sale, where he sold all his gear on Reverb, and he parlayed that into one or two Magic guitars, he said. So this one is undoubtedly one of those Magic guitars, and what a cool looking Les Paul. Nice.
And then we've got Meet the Cleaver.
Mm-hmm. Which is his signature guitar. I think the Made in Mexico one, it was a double humbucker thing.
Yeah, I think so.
But this new one is blue, and it's got two P90s and block inlays. It's got Fralin P90s and stuff. But yeah, super cool guitar.
And this one's Fender Master built as well. Mm-hmm. So I bet it plays super well. And then let's see here, the Flying V is pretty sick.
Oh man,
yeah,
love a Flying V.
2002 Flying V. I mean, and then let's take a look at this pedal board down here.
Okay,
there's a lot going on.
Yeah, so we've got he's got Micropog, JHS Muffaletta, a pair of MXR flanger and EVH Phase 90.
Yep.
Holy Grail, a Strymon Deco, a Klon KTR, a CE2 Waza, Timeline, EP Booster, SP Compressor, and the XW. Two Timelines, excuse me. And then the XW1, which is the exotic wah. And that's going into the Layla dual amp switcher. He's got all sorts of things, huge switching system down here.
Yeah.
A Polytune to keep it all locked in.
What's cool about that is the two different timelines are labeled. So one's labeled Friedman, one's labeled AC30, and I'm imagining he's got different delay settings for each amp going into that. I haven't watched the rig rundown yet because they haven't sent it to us, but so we're going to be left speculating a little bit here. So
we'll watch it.
And then speaking of amps, what do we got?
Oh, we got a bunch of Friedman and then Vox AC30s. Looks like the hand-wired variety, but he's got two Friedman. Which one is this? Oh, Brown Eye.
Yeah.
So two of the B100s half stacks, and then two AC30 hand-wired half stacks.
Okay, man. All right, well, I should point out, I have seen Foo Fighters before. Music Midtown 2011, I want to say it was. Now, I imagine his rig has changed a little bit since I saw them, but it was one of the best sounding shows. Well, scratch that. It was actually one of the best shows I've ever seen. If you've never seen Foo Fighters live, they put on a hell of a show. So, with that said, I love this Les Paul. I think it's super cool. I think the fact that it's stripped and you can see the 3-piece top makes it super unique.
Yeah.
I imagine, those are so late 57 had the cream pickup surrounds, right? It was early 57s that had the black.
Only the very, very earliest ones had black, and then the pickup covers were like unplated. I think they might have been steel.
Yeah.
They weren't even nickel silver. But if that one had gold, obviously it had cream rings, so it's a little bit later. But I don't think there were many gold tops with black plastic that ever made it into the world, really.
There's at least one at Songbirds that we've seen.
Yeah.
God, I bet that thing sounds good.
Yeah.
There's PAFs in there.
So,
yeah. The Cleaver.
Cleaver rules.
Yeah.
Cool guitar.
2P90s, Telly with the Les Paul control plate and, switch. Love that. Flying V, what more can you ask? I want to move on to this pedal board, though. So,
sure.
Interesting things here. I have some suggestions, Chris, if you'll hear me out. I think the selection of stuff on here is really good. I love the Deco. I think that's still one of the most underrated pedals out there. I think a lot of people are sleeping on the Deco because I think Strymon hasn't done a great job of explaining what that pedal actually is and what you can do with it, which is quite a bit.
Yeah,
I'd be interested to see how he's using it here. He's got both sides engaged, so it looks like a little bit of tape saturation and some either probably flanging if you look at where that top right knob is.
Yeah, my biggest complaint with the Deco is knowing how to set the damn thing. I have to keep the little instruction manual nearby because I don't remember.
I mean, just you turn it until it sounds good. That's how you do it.
I know, but I just want to go fast.
Okay, yeah. EP Boost, great.
Classic.
KTR, great. Shouldn't have sold mine, but I did. The 2 timelines, I really like. But here, I have some suggestions. Now, for someone like Chris Shiflett, who's got, a tech and crew and roadies that are moving all of his stuff around for him, this is not that big of a deal. But as a guy who still lugs all his own shit around, we could really streamline this board quite a bit, make it smaller, a little bit more efficient with the wiring. I would like to see that switcher, that loop switcher, changed out for something a little bit more modern, like an RJM, for example. Maybe something with some MIDI capabilities so you could tie in those timelines together. Because I imagine, he's probably engaging and disengaging multiple effects at the same time. And even with this loop switcher, he's probably having to do quite a bit of tap dancing around the bottom of the board. And if you got something a little more modern in terms of a switcher, like a gig rig or an RJM with MIDI capability and presets, it would also allow you to switch loops and the order in which pedals are in what order they're in. It would also be smaller. And I would go to a tiered pedal board because a lot of the stuff, I imagine he's not changing the settings on the MXR pedals or the muffle. He's probably not changing settings on really any of the stuff for a live show. It's probably already dialed in. So
it looks like the Strymons are on some sort of bridge because they appear higher than the rest of the stuff.
Yeah, and you can see it's labeled up and down for banking. So he is probably at least banking stuff around, banking presets around the Strymons. But again, dude, if you got a MIDI switcher, you could pre-program all that stuff. And instead of having to hit 3 or 4 different switches, you hit one switch and everything changes on your board.
Right. Yeah. To me, the thing that as much as I enjoy MXR pedals and I love the CE2, maybe consolidate that into one multi-effect unit that you could switch. I mean, if you had a gig rig or whatever, it could probably handle all that too. Then you wouldn't have to worry about hitting as much, even though I'm sure he's probably not using multiple modulations on a single song. But yeah,
I like the GFI synesthesia for that. I think that's a good. And if you got your switcher, your MIDI switcher, that's MIDI capable too, stereo in and out, so you could make it play nicely with the 2 amps.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, what would you rate this Rockstar rig?
All right. I love the guitar selection. I would like to see something in the guitars that's a little bit more traditional single coil, because with those amps, with that AC30 and with that BE, Something like a straight ahead telly would be really nice. I'd like to see
Sure.
that. The Cleaver's cool. You can't go wrong with two P90s. Two P90s in telly body. It's classic. Love it. Hardtail strap bridge. That's super cool. I would like to see the inclusion of probably a telly, like a good old fashioned, just blackguard kind of thing.
Sure.
Pedalboard, great selection of stuff. I like it. I think it could be modernized. This looks like a pedalboard that was built in 2006 or 7 and hasn't really been changed since. Even the cables, the patch cables, like gotta get a low profile on
Just
that.
lay it anywhere. Just spaghetti it down. It's fine. It's fine. They're all shielded.
They're all shielded. Amps. I like the amps. I would be interested to see what this Vox sounds like. The modern hand-wired stuff, the Fawn stuff, traditionally to me has been a little harsh in the top end. I don't always love it, but depending on what speakers he's got, and maybe these amps are modded, to take care of that. Not really sure, but so I'm gonna give this 8.6 Shoyles.
Nice. Yeah, I kind of feel you on the maybe adding a single coil guitar, but for me, all I'd be playing would be that 57 Les Paul. So other guitars be damned. My favorite thing about all these pictures, though, is how he's got the picks on the vent of those Voxes, because I feel like that is just a recipe for either really hot picks, which I don't know, maybe he's into that, add a little
Keeps
flex,
them warm,
or they just fall in there and you'll never get them out.
Oh no, they're not going to fall in there. They're too wide to fit through those. I thought you were going to say a recipe for overheating the amp, but that's not.
No.
For
Those
an
picks
old
could
Vox,
totally fit in there.
No, dude, no. Look at that pink, the pink one that says Shifty. It's wider than look at that. It's wider than that slot. There's no way
They're gonna get so hot they'll just slide right down there like
it's just gonna melt.
like a piece of American cheese.
Oh Jesus Christ.
But the board, I kind of agree. I feel like maybe adding something with a little more modern flexibility would help. It would probably help his just mind out, but just having like one switch that does everything. And I would consolidate some of that modulation because, why not? Just tidy it up and be lighter.
We just modernize that board just in general, I think.
Yeah, I think it's not overdoing anything. It's just big, So yeah, I think I'm right there with you. I think for the Les Paul alone, I want to give it a 9.
Oh, yeah, the Les Paul's
9
moving
Shoyles.
some points for sure.
Yeah, it's moving something in me.
Yeah, so here's the deal, Chris. Help us help you. Come on the show. Let's talk about it. Let's work through your pedalboard woes. And we'll go from there. So yeah, man, we got a pretty important guest coming up, and we've taken our sweet time on this intro. So
Yes.
let's go over to Joe's house and talk about
Wait.
Oh,
Before we go, we do need to say that visit stumac.com/dipped in tone. Check out all this stuff. You can get 10% off, I believe, any regularly priced StuMac item. Double check on the website for all the details. But another thing that we didn't mention before is all of those tools that if you get, fret files or anything, really, they're all backed with a lifetime promise. If it ever breaks, fails to perform, or if you just don't like it, they'll replace it free of charge forever. So if you're wanting to get into setting up your guitars, if you're wanting to just do the things that we talk about, something that I enjoy doing, it's like my meditation time at night, putting on a TV show, restringing and setting up my guitars to make them play how I want them to play. Why not get the best tools? Just go check out.
The thing that I
link,
like about
stumac.com.
StuMac is they have like they've created these tools that are so specific for lutherie and guitar work. Like,
Yes.
just go watch their YouTube channel, watch all those Dan Earlywine videos, because it's like here's a really specific, strange job that I only have to do once a year, and here's this StuMac tool that's designed specifically to do this in one step. So,
Well, I mean, like if you're a luthier or work in a repair shop, you want that to maximize efficiency. My favorite example of this is the knob puller.
Yes,
it's just like a
exactly.
little claw
Yeah.
that slides down over a knob, and you just yoink it right up,
Yep.
and it's off. You don't have to worry about it flying across the room.
Yep.
Or like it's really easy to break a knob if you don't know what you're doing.
oh yeah, for sure.
But yeah,
Okay, so before we jump into the interview with Joe, I think you've got something to debut and announce, right?
I do. Since it is Halloween.
Oh my God.
What?
No, I got nothing. No, that was not like I'm not making a dig. That was like I'm trying to like build suspense here. Mm-hmm. No, okay. I'm serious. That was not meant as a dig, dude. I promise.
Anyway, historically on Halloween, I have released the Positron Collider, which is my homage to my favorite ghost catching movie from 1984. But for this year, we're making a standard model, and we're calling it the Positron.
Yeah.
So the Positron is the basic fuzz circuit from the Positron Collider, just streamlined. It's not as garish as the original, and it has the same volume, gain, treble, bass, which you have a Positron Collider.
I do. It's awesome.
It's a cool circuit, but one thing we added for this is this little switch that says loud, and when you flip it
what does that do?
What it does is it takes the Ram's Head style circuit and shifts it to a color sound super tone bender circuit, which is a variant of, that pi circuit. But it's, oh my gosh, it's so cool. It's so loud. It is so unbelievably loud, this thing, that I don't know. I think people might find this just to be a joke where it says loud, but we mean it. It's really loud. But yeah, Positron Cascading Amplifier Distortion.
Wasn't the color sound? Wasn't that what Gilmour used on the Time solo? I read that it was a color sound. Or it might have been a power booster going into a twin.
Probably used a power boost. So the super tone bender was a Big Muff Pi variant,
right?
And it just has a weird clipping arrangement, but we tried it in this, and it was just, I don't know, it just sounds really good. So.
Nice. Lovely.
That's
Congratulations. Happy release day. You missed an opportunity to say ghoulish instead of garish, but we'll let that slide. All right, so last week we went over to Nerdville East, Nerdville, Nashville, if you will. And we sat down with our friend Joe Bonamassa, and we talked about sort of the state of the vintage guitar market. This whole conversation stemmed from a video that I made a few weeks ago on my YouTube channel with Rick Beato, Dave Honorato, and Keith Williams from 5 Watt World about, will vintage guitars be worth anything when boomers are gone? And Joe had some thoughts about that video that he shared with me and with Rick after seeing it. And so we get into that pretty deep on this episode. But yeah.
It's very exciting. We talk about fan fret instruments. We talk about a lot of things that, like, I wanted to talk to Joe about things he doesn't normally talk about. Which I think is a good thing when you're interviewing people that people have been. I mean, he's been interviewed so many times. Why not talk about something different?
Yeah, for sure. So, without further ado, here's our first guest interview on Dipped in Tone. Joe, thanks for having us.
Thank you for coming to Nerdville East, Rhett. It's a pleasure.
I can actually say that the pleasure is all mine walking around. This place is doing a lot for my ADD. There's so much stuff to look at. Everything's interesting. Legitimately, everything is interesting. I mean, I think I'm most impressed so far with the signs that you have. We were talking about that on the way in.
Yeah.
I mean, guitars are cool, amps are cool, but these vintage signs, I mean, everyone's got to have a story, right?
Everyone has a story. Here's the thing about memorabilia. You have to remember what it was for. They would, in some cases, like Fender or Gibson, would sell stores a sign. It would be in the catalogs. They'd be in the catalogs. Be like, well, here's a sign, and or a clock that said Gibson, or a sign that said Fender. It's like right over your shoulder. There's a 1964 Fender dealer sign that says Fender Electric Instruments, and they would hang it in the store to entice customers. Just remember, there's Fender guitars. So those signs, they only needed one for their store, but they would sell hundreds of guitars over the years. Mm-hmm. So the signs are a lot rarer than the actual guitars themselves, because each store only needed one sign.
Yeah.
They only needed one Gibson clock, and if it burned out, they would buy one more. So they made a lot less memorabilia than actual instruments. So when you decide to do a house of guitars like this, the memorabilia part of it is really important, and it ties everything together. It's not just a bunch of gear just set up, you know.
It does actually feel like a museum in here.
Yeah, it's
It
very
does. That's
like organized and thought out.
organized hoarding.
Yeah.
And it's actually better put together and more interesting than most guitar stores I've ever been in either, which is great.
Well, most of this stuff came out of guitar stores that were pretty ramshackle. It's important to realize that I'm not your competitor. I don't know who's bidding on this guitar and amp on Reverb. That's not me. Nothing wrong with Reverb. I think they've changed the game, and they're really nice guys, and they've come up with a beautiful business model. I'm not your guy competing on eBay. I don't sit online going, hey, this looks cool, because I don't need a guitar that bad, and I don't need anything. I like finding stuff in the wild, because not only am I purchasing an item that will look cool in the house, aka memorabilia or a sign, or in the case of a guitar or amp, I can actually play. But I'm also purchasing a story. And I can pretty much within 5% tell you where everything came from and a backstory of how I got it. So if you want to randomly select an item.
All right. Okay. I'll take you up on that. This behind me, is that a bandstand? What is
The Rhythm Airs?
Yeah.
Virginia Beach, Virginia. There's a great antique mall. Huge. Probably 150,000 square feet. All, it's an antique mall. It's basically a series of dealers.
Yeah.
So it's a consortium of sort. And, everybody has a theme. You could just tell how their eyes go and what they gravitate to at yard sales, garage sales, estate sales. And it's everything from Franklin Mint, reissue, Silver Ghost, Rolls Royces, to, a butter churn, Farm Road. Everybody likes a sign in their house that said Farm Road. And if you go in to that Virginia Beach Antique Center, you make a left, and the second aisle on the right, there's a guy who has a really good eye for signage. And I bought the arrow that's in the back here, that's on the deck. I bought the Rhythm Air sign, and I purchased something else it's eluding me. The Fisher sign that's right over there. That was in the year 2017 summer, probably around August. How was that?
All right.
Perfect.
Nice. So before we move on, we should plug. So you're in town for rehearsals for an upcoming tour, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're rehearsing. We rehearse here in Nashville because it's logistically so much easier than rehearsing somewhere else. I mean, all our gear is here. The production company that we rent our trucks and PA and everything is here. The bus company is here. It's Music City. I mean, it's like and it's all within 15 minutes. So it really makes it easier. And we start, I don't know when this is going to air, but we start November 1st in Springfield, Missouri. Then we go to Springfield, Illinois. So we're hitting 2 Springfields. We work our way up through like Green Bay, Minneapolis. Minneapolis was the final. We set up in Minneapolis on March 11th, 2020. We were set up. We're ready to go. And then the mayor shut us down literally at 6:30 at night. And then what was it? And then we'll make our way down through we'll make our way through the Midwest into Arizona, Reno, and we end up in Spokane, Washington. And it'll take about, 30 days to do it.
Yeah, so this is going up on Halloween on the 31st.
Okay, even better.
I will. We'll both have links to your tour dates, tickets, all that stuff.
I appreciate
down
it.
below.
Thank you.
And yeah. All right.
Well,
so
what do you want to talk about? We've already talked about how OCD and what a photographic memory I have.
Okay, so Zach and I were kicking this around. A few weeks ago, I made a video with some friends of mine.
You want to start with this?
Oh yeah, let's just jump right into it.
Okay.
Okay, so on my YouTube channel, we made this video. Are vintage guitars going to be worth anything when boomers are gone? Mm-hmm. You watched the video. It made its rounds. It got around. Yeah. Now, we talked offline about it a little bit.
Well, here's the thing. Okay. The video was sent to me by a friend of mine who's also a collector. And he was like, what are these guys talking about? And here's the thing. And I sent you a text and I sent Rick a text. And because I consider you a friend and I consider Rick a friend. When I see things getting off the rails, I look out for people that I'm friends with. Be like, hey, this may blow back on you. Uh-huh. And that was the intent of me. This wasn't me saying, hey, what the fuck are you talking about? But in a polite way, I was saying, what the fuck are you guys talking about?
It wasn't taken in any kind of ill will.
Because everybody has an opinion on this. You guys were speculating.
Right.
You guys were speculating. But it would be like my going on doing a video of me speculating on railroad futures, in 2025 when I have absolutely no experience in the railroad business. The thing about vintage guitars, any collectible, it's solely based on two things. One, its relevancy. If you watch Antiques Roadshow, I don't know if
oh yeah,
if you watch Antiques Roadshow since the pandemic, what they've been doing is they've been kind of updating old episodes. So they'll go back to 2007, 2008, and somebody, back at the height of this antiques market, so somebody's plate or I don't know, some clock from the 1800s or some, it was worth $10,000 to $15,000, and they'll show the price, whether it's gone up or down. A lot of times you're seeing those items going down because the relevancy of that item, it just doesn't have any functional use anymore other than a decorative piece and a historical significance. With guitars, they're still functional, they're still relevant even in pop music. And my experience being so intimately involved in vintage guitars and collectibles is in the last 48 months, about 2018, started to see a lot of new people being interested in vintage guitars. Two factors go into that. One, what they're buying is a little different than what we bought back in the 90s. What they're buying is their youth. They have discretionary income. They've bought their house. They have a career. They're stable, and they go, you know what I've always wanted? I wanted an Eddie Van Halen Charvel my whole life. And next thing you know, Eddie Van Halen, San Dimas Charvels are $10,000 because there's a demand.
Right.
Next thing you know, they go, well, I really want to get a 57 Strat because Rhett Shull says 57 Strats were the shit. Okay. Next thing you know, he forks out $40,000 for a 57 Strat. Now you have him. That's a gateway drug. Oh, I should really get a Les Paul Jr. You know what? If I take all this stuff, I can get a gold top with PAFs. But yeah, still, if I take the gold top and then I mortgage my house that my wife doesn't know about, I can buy one of these Sunburst Les Pauls. That's how it is. And a lot of that stuff is happening. People age 35 to 50. And that's where, so the point about the boomers is, yes, there are a lot of people in their mid 60s, approaching 70, thinking about their mortality, thinking about an exit strategy, thinking about where this stuff will go. But if you ask a dealer right now, be like, man, I can't keep good shit on the floor because nobody, for some reason, it's exploded worldwide. And it's like, if you get a clean Strat, you get a clean Black Artellis are insane now. Yeah. Insane. And they'll probably still be insane on Halloween, but I'm even going, whoa, it's crazy.
Yeah.
You get a clean Blackguard Fender Telecaster, it just seems to just disappear. Les Paul Juniors, which there used to be thousands of them around, can't find them. So my point is it's not just a bunch of doctors, lawyers, and dentists sitting there drinking, brandy, smoking cigars, and hoarding this shit. And when they die off, there'll be 50 million guitars that are worth zero. In my prediction, and I could be wrong, and you could be like, see, Joe, you're full of shit. My prediction is that there will always be a market tied to the economic fortunes and interests and musical tastes of people between the ages of 30 and 40. Mm-hmm. And once people establish their careers, once people establish their lifestyles, that's when they get interested in this shit.
Do you think that that the golden era stuff will always have, of course it's always going to be the most sought after, but do you think it's going to have the same appeal? And not necessarily when the boomers are gone, but look, when the next generation, the kids who are teenagers now, when they get to the point of having income, is that going to be a guitar that they'll even be interested in the way that it kind of is now? Because I talked to John at Carter Vintage, and he says that electrics far and away are the most popular vintage thing. The acoustic world has kind of slowed down the mandolins and stuff, which I worked there for a time. I saw, people buying Lures, not hand over fist, but pretty frequently, and that has slowed way down. But just because of the popularity of maybe that music a little bit waning worldwide. But electric guitars are still moving. But will that era, you think, have the same appeal to maybe the next generation?
It may or may not. And if you ask somebody, I have a bunch of friends and I run tours of these museums. There's 3 of them now. And a lot of people in their 20s, they'll come up to my house and they're guitar players, great guitar players, and they've never seen a Tweed Fender amp, or maybe they've seen a Tweed Fender amp at Guitar Center or wherever. They've never seen 100 of them at the same time.
Right.
They've never held a Sunburst Les Paul. And they always say pretty much the same thing. Man, one of these days I'm going to get X. Man, one of these days I'm going to get Y. And I remember when I was 22 and living in New York City and literally had a $20 a day budget for ramen noodles, peanut butter and jelly, and wheat bread. I just like, and Diet Coke. And the wheat bread I like because it saves some calories and carbs, but that was it. Okay. And I never thought I'd see one of these Sunburst Les Pauls, let alone own one. But I said to myself, one of these days I'm going to get this, and one of these days I'm going to get that. And my father was in the guitar business, but could never afford to keep anything. Even if it was cool, it's got to go. Yeah. You can make $500. That's 2 weeks groceries and expenses for the family. Mm-hmm. And when my fortune started to change and I started to do reasonably well in the music business, I was able to afford it and was able to buy and hold stuff and didn't have to sell it, And the appeal of it is going to be indelibly linked to people's passion for guitar, which we just went through a renaissance phase.
We still are.
You know what I mean? Like the appeal of guitar is, this because you're indelibly linked to it, is the appeal of guitar is like in the last 18 to 24 months has just gone through the roof. So that gives me hope that one of these days, all of this will maintain its value. Yeah, and the outliers, the stock market goes down, this goes down. It's the same thing with the price of commodities or gold or whatever, you know. But the thing is about a gold brick. If you say, hey, I'll give you a gold brick for that Tweed Super. I'm like, no, I can't fucking play the Tweeds. I can't play the gold brick. Who cares about gold? Yeah. Gold is just, that's where people run and put their assets and they buy it from William Devane on, and it's like, and it's like, well, what are you going to do with it? If the apocalypse comes, you're not going to trade your gold brick for a bottle of water. So if you're going to get stuck with anything, it'd be great if it works. and great, you can make music on it. So if it's worth $1, fine. I'm still happy.
Sure.
Because it's still worth $1.
So I agree with you. And my point in the video, the original video that we made, was more or less in line with what you just said.
Yeah.
I think that because of the fact that these are instruments, these are tools for creation, because they have had such an impact, such a cultural impact across the world for the better part of 60 plus 70 years almost at this point, there's always going to be a market that will support specifically the gold era, like high end stuff.
Yeah.
Like the Les Pauls, early Strats, Blackguards, things like that. And that's not even getting into the acoustic worlds, like pre-war Martins, pre-war war era Gibsons, that kind of stuff, which is a different thing. But I think there is something interesting that your point brought to mind about demand. So I was talking to, on my podcast a couple years ago, I had Tosin Abasi on. And the topic of influence came up, and it was interesting how guitar players today, and I see this a lot in my comments section, younger guitar players, they tend to kind of go one of two ways. You get into guitar, you start listening to music, you start developing your own musical taste, and you either go forward and more progressive in what's happening, what's on the bleeding edge of what can you do with this 6, 7, 8 string instrument, or you do what I did and you did and you did, which is go back and look at, okay, where did this come from? Where, most of the music I listened to wasn't even made in this century, So I think that's an interesting shift that is happening now. And with young players, I see it in my comment section whenever I talk about vintage guitars or even custom shop recreations of vintage guitars, I get one of two very, very strong responses from people, keeping in mind that comments are the very vocal minority of people that are watching a video or a podcast. But it's either that's amazing, one day I would love to own that, or I can't believe that no guitar is worth more than $1,500, and so
that's the loud minority. So what's your question? I'm sorry.
Well, no, I was just following up with, I agree with you that the demand for the high end vintage stuff will be there, but it, I guess, still remains to be seen what the people that started playing guitar in 2020 and 10 years from now, when they are the next generation of pro players and their sessions and they're out touring and playing stuff, are they still actually going to be looking for the vintage stuff? And that was Rick's point in the video, was no, but I don't necessarily.
That's and Rick is a super smart guy and sees it from a perspective that I can't see it from, because he's indelibly linked to more of an online presence, and where he sees comment sections. So to your point, the comment sections. I live in more of the 3D world, where I just see I just know what this stuff trades for, and I know that I've watched the demographic switch, because a lot of the people that are in their, I hate that word boomers. Is a lot of people in their 60s, early 70s, they're not buying, maybe a little bit, but they had all their fun when they were in their 40s. And now you're starting to see the same thing happen again, where people people in their mid 40s and in late 30s, mid 40s, that's when they're going, man, they go down these rabbit holes. Well, look at this. This is a gigantic rabbit hole. I mean, like there's I was a pair and a spare guy for 10 years. It's like, what do I need? One? I need three, a pair and a spare. But I've really curtailed those addictions. I was addicted to it. So nobody's going to take it. I highly suggest nobody take it to this level, but because it's a lot to unwind and the place feels heavy. It is heavy. It's worth a lot of money at the current market value. But the thing is what I've learned over the years and through mistakes and my own ignorance, but I've come I've come full circle on it. It's like, you cannot dismiss anything ad hoc. There's intrinsic value to any topic, subject, tranche of a subject that you can you can think of. I sent Tosin a video of myself in Syracuse, New York. Josh Smith took it. I was playing with one of his fan fret 8 strings. Could not play a fucking chord on it. And Josh is filming it. I said, we got to send it to Tosin. I mean, I could not. It was so foreign feeling to me because I was like, oh, literally couldn't. I mean, the music store was laughing. They probably posted on their Facebook going like, what an idiot, But I'm like, the old me would be like, well, this doesn't make any sense. But then you watch him play it. And you're like, well, it makes a lot of sense because he's re-envisioned, he's built his playing style around that instrument.
Right.
I built my playing style around that instrument. And so I can't just go like, that doesn't make any sense to me. That's not the way we used to do it. No, it's the way it's done now. Same thing with like, there's no guitar that's worth $1,500. I'm like, okay, says you.
Yeah.
Says you. And how many of these have you actually handled?
Right.
And those are the ones that get themselves into trouble when they said, blah, 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 blah. This, Tweed Fender amps are nothing but something. I'm like, well, how many have you plugged into? Well, I heard my friends one time. Okay, right. Well, then you don't know because you haven't had a minute to live with one and see what they do.
And they're also different. If you played one, you might have played a bad.
Whether you have a Celestion in one's healthier than the next. Right. There's no piece of gear that's made the same. So it's like you can't dismiss ad hoc on. There's no amp that's worth more than this. There's no guitar worth more than that. It's like saying, why is the surf and turf at Red Lobster so expensive? It's only worth what somebody's willing to pay for it.
Well, I think the Tosin thing is an interesting point. I actually think that he has, and players like him, have created an instrument around their playing style. Whereas when I pick up a Les Paul, there is an inherent sound that I'm going for because it is a Les Paul. And I think the more modern players nowadays, guys like Tosin, aren't they don't think that way. And that was my point earlier. You either go forward or go backward.
Well, there's also players that are completely, they base their style completely on improvisation. Mm-hmm. Like I'm one of them. It's like I don't work things out in advance. I just react and just go, hey, we're good, or not. And then there's people that really work stuff out. So it's two different schools of thought. It's just the kind of music you play, the kind of music that Tosin and a lot of these kind of like cutting edge players play. I mean, it's extremely technical and it's extremely composed and worked out. I mean, it would take me 6 weeks to get through one verse of Tosin's song. I'd be like,
it's very athletic.
Well, it's also challenging the norms of what can be done on a guitar. It's like Ted Green playing jazz on a telly. You can't play jazz on a telly. Right. He did. Gatton played jazz on a telly. But you know what I mean? It's like it takes somebody like that to say, hey, listen, I hear you, but I'm going to try something new with this thing because, it's like, why add to the noise if it's just going to sound like everybody else?
Sure. Yeah, those guitars are very, because I had a Strandberg, which he made fun of me relentlessly for it. Because I have Les Pauls and all this stuff. I love the vintage thing, but I wanted to try it just to challenge what I thought I could do on the instrument. And it does take you a different place because where normally you're reacting to your guitar, those guitars, it's just about your hands and where your head takes you, because they don't, at least in my experience, they don't give a whole lot back. Not to say that they're bad instruments, but they are strictly made to execute what you give to it.
And do they have the squiggly line frets?
Mine didn't have the true temperament, but it was a fan fret.
Okay, so that's not really a bending machine.
It's
hard to play Albert King on that.
I kind of disagree. I
Really?
feel like I felt like for me, I could do everything.
You could bend on a fan fret.
Oh, yeah.
That was what I was having an issue was I couldn't. I was like, it felt weird to bend because everything was at an angle.
You were also playing an 8-string, right?
Yeah.
7-string?
Yeah,
That might have.
It had more strings than I was used to.
Yeah, and a wider fretboard on
I
that.
think there was a C on the bottom.
Yeah.
I was like, whoa.
And to be fair, my only issue with the Strandberg is the no headstock. That's just a non-starter for me.
know,
I just can't get past
Well, it's
it.
gone now, Rhett. So
Thank God. I don't have to look at it anymore.
Do you know the headstock design really is one of the make or break parts of a guitar that denotes whether it's going to sell or not? If you
I
think
completely believe that. Yeah.
If you think about the headstock of a specific instrument, if it's got a weird looking headstock, you probably don't want it.
Yeah.
yeah.
It could be beautifully made, perfect, just a beautiful instrument, but it's got a weird headstock.
Oh yeah, it's make or
Like
break for
nobody
me.
it's really, and to think about all the great designers, graphic designers, great designers. I mean, man, did Gibson, Epiphone, Fender, Gretsch, Rickenbacker, Martin. Boy, did they get it right the first time.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's very, I think the only person to really come close to the indelibly linked headstock to a guitar is Paul Reed Smith. It's like you look at Paul Reed Smith, like that's a headstock.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's totally informed by the function of how we wanted the tuners to line up and everything too.
Yeah, and it's lined up, and it's something binary. It makes you feel good.
Yeah.
Or conversely, if it's kind of got a weird design, it makes you feel kind of.
I've never seen you play a Paul Reed Smith guitar in all the years. Have you ever owned one or like?
I own one. I actually own a Paul Reed Smith.
You own one?
I own one Paul Reed Smith. It was a gift from my friend Zach Myers. He gave me a Zach Myers caster, and it's really nice.
Yeah. Oh, they're great guitars.
They're great guitars.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like
I've historically, it's not to interrupt you, I've historically had an issue with Paul Reed Smith because of the hybrid scaling.
right.
Because I'm so stick and rudder, and I grew up on it. When there's a Strat involved, I know everything kind of just readjusts. When there's a Tele, Les Paul, 335. The amalgamation of the Fender Gibson scale always threw me off a little bit because I didn't know really where to stick the elbow,
Right.
and it just felt a little too short or too long.
Mm-hmm.
So on the vintage guitar discussion, do you think that, because you've been in this for a long time, and I would imagine you've watched this market explode over the last...
Oh, I've watched it flatline. I've watched it explode. I've watched it implode. I've watched it come back. I've watched it go down. And I've watched it explode again.
So how do you feel about guitars as investments? Because this is another thing that I've seen people talk about, or people have talked to me about. I bought a 65 SG Junior earlier this year. Beautiful guitar, total ringer. And large part of the response that I got was like, oh, it's a great investment. You can make so much money off that thing. And I don't think I necessarily agree with that. But
okay. I have a riddle for you. What do you call someone who buys a vintage guitar, plays it for 6 months, and sells it for $1 more than he paid for it? A guitar dealer. Cannot look at it from that point of view. I think, are they good investments historically in my world? Absolutely. Because I've done a buy and hold. I don't get rid of stuff.
yeah.
So I liked it in 2010. I've had it here since 2010, and it's worth more now if I sold it than what I paid for it. That's great. I know people have gotten into vintage guitars. We're talking about non-dealers. Dealers that's what they do for a living.
Right.
You got to make the
Doesn't count.
37%
Yeah,
margin.
sure.
That's how. Let's put them on another. But I've watched people come in hot and heavy, buying bursts, buying Dumbles, buying this, and then 6 weeks later going, what's it worth now? Like in trying to get 20 points over. It's not the way I do it, and I don't really feel that those kind of buyers and flippers, I don't feel the love from them for the stuff. Say what you will about me as a person, player, whatever. Nobody can deny that I love this shit.
Right.
That's pretty obvious.
It's obvious.
Yeah.
So and you could listen if you got the money to buy it. You could do whatever you want. But I also do think that it does taint the intent gets tainted if it's just I have a portfolio in oil, I have a portfolio in Bitcoin, and I got a burst. Mm-hmm. Okay, well you really equate that. You know, a Bitcoin is beautifully made and crafted and designed as a Sunburst Les Paul from 1958. I don't buy it.
Right.
But if you look at it just as a strict numbers game, then okay, then yeah, maybe you made more money on the Bitcoin than you did on the guitar. Maybe you're gonna, they're good investments, but you cannot just go, well, that's the only reason I bought this vintage guitar is because they said it was going to go up 30, by 30 points in a year and a half. You may make 100% on your money, or you may lose money.
Yeah.
Right.
But you still have to make that deal with yourself, going, hey, listen, this thing makes me happy. Mm-hmm. I love my SG Junior.
Yeah.
It's worth $1,000 less than I paid for it, and I'll never sell it because I don't want to take a haircut. And B, it's still cool, and I'm making music on it. That's the way I look at it.
What do you think the next? I mean, again, this is just guessing, but I mean, we've seen. You mentioned Les Paul Juniors and Melody Makers have just exploded in price. Like, you think student models is the only way for people? Because so many people want to get into this world, and then that's like the total deep end. I mean, that's jumping into the middle of the ocean. Where do you think people should start even looking? Because I mean, now vintage is only 25 years ago. If we want to be,
I feel bad. I really feel bad, and I know here comes the comments like, "Well, you buy everything," blah 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 blah. Let's just address supply in that question. You know how many guitars from all strata, student guitars, professional guitars, you know how many guitars were made between 1950 and 1965? Thousands, tens of thousands, especially, and then from 1964, the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, was it 64, I think? Mm-hmm. Beatles on Ed Sullivan. Then Fender added a second shift in 66 to keep up with the demand.
Right.
I have 500 of those guitars, of the tens and tens and tens of thousands that were made. So the fact that he owns all the guitars, that's complete bullshit.
Yeah.
I feel bad for people that are really passionate about it and want to get into it, and they save up some money, and just as they save up enough money to buy a Les Paul Jr. because they were $4,500. Next thing you know, there's somebody gets $6,000 on reverb, and then the baseline price goes up, and it's like, well, sorry.
Yeah.
I feel because the intent of that person buying a Les Paul Jr. or Fender Jaguar, offsets are hot. Everybody wants a Jazzmaster Jaguar. Those things you used to buy for $1,800.
Oh yeah.
And your friends, the cork sniffing friends would be like, why are you buying that junk?
Right.
No, that's cool. I love Jaguars. I love Jazzmasters. Great rhythm guitars, great pieces of art. But now somebody sent me a picture of a Sunburst Jaguar from Arlington last weekend. It was $8,500. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you know how many Sunburst Jaguars there are? Tens of thousands. Yeah. It's not exactly a rare guitar. So I feel bad for the generation who wants to get in, but just can't swing it. I mean, it's hard enough to making a living in the music business it's worse or on par with starting a restaurant. It's a tough business to make money at. But if you want to get into this thing where you want to have a guitar, a functioning instrument to play, I think Ryan Lerman does it great. He finds bits and pieces of parts and shit, and he just jams them onto Duosonics and Mustangs.
Right.
And they're cool. I've seen a bunch of them.
They sound great.
They sound great. He's a great player. He could play a wooden log with strings, and he's going to sound great. But he wants in on this vintage thing, and he just goes, I just built this thing from parts. You can still get this cheap. You can still get that cheap. And he builds a hybrid caster, and they're great, and that's what you're seeing a lot of people in their 20s and 30s doing, going, I mean, I can't afford the straight one, but I'll just take the one that's all messed up and make it my own.
Which in a lot of ways I think is almost more admirable, because it shows that I think the love for the instrument is there. It's not just about the status symbol of owning the vintage piece of gear that has the right year and the right name and it's all straight and
it's connecting with the instrument that you want to play.
Yeah, which I think is super cool.
Yeah, I mean that's the reason that generation gets vintage way more than I do, because I'm operating two different things going on here. I got a museum running. Okay, I got, within 15 feet there's a mint condition 68 actually Sonic Blue Telly, one of the rarest guitars you can ever go for. Things in immaculate condition. I've played 3 chords on it.
So
so that's the museum side of the Nerdville. Then there's the 50 guitars that I play.
Okay, that leads me into my next question. One of the things that I learned early on when I first started playing and picking up and learning about vintage guitars is they're not all good. No. In fact, in my experience, most of them are actually not all that great. The reason I bought my SG Junior, I wasn't looking for one, but I picked it up and it was a dead ringer. And it was a friend of mine selling it. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm in the market for a vintage SG Junior. So of your collection of guitars, how many are playable, would you say, and how many are truly great?
They're all playable. They're not all set up to play. There's a difference. They all play. Can you go from buying the guitar to stage? No. There's certain things you have to do.
Yeah.
About 10% of my collection is in constant rotation for the live gigs. There's about 50 guitars. Every once in a while, and I'd say another 10% of that rotates out in the studio world, meaning that the acoustics come out. More of the mint stuff I'll bring to the studio and just play. This thing sounds great. It's but I don't want to sweat on it, for a tour. So at the end of the day, most of the old guitars, 99% of the old guitars that I play on the road are refretted. You have to.
Yeah.
You need new tires.
Yeah.
Right.
Like this guitar is refretted. This came from South Africa. It had no frets on it.
Yeah.
So what am I gonna do? Hang it on the wall? It's all original.
Yeah.
But you can't play a chord on it. So went to Joe Glazer and it's got new frets and it's been on 2 tours. About to go on the road this fall. So there's that. Then there's stuff that is so preserved and so clean that I'm holding, that I found original owners and stuff like that my ego isn't big enough to be like, I'm not going to be the first person to put a scratch on it. I'm a custodian. Mm-hmm. And you sit at home and play it and stuff. But if you really want to get into it and dig in, you're going to nick them.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So they've been this way for 70 years or 65 years. I don't want to be that person because I'm lucky enough to have other stuff I could play, and I'll beat the hell out of that because if I'm going to play in a live sense or in the studio, I want to make it count. I'm not just going to, I always say, you play the guitar, don't let the guitar play you. It's true.
What do you think? Because this is something we've talked about a lot, like the current state of guitar, like from the high-end manufacturers like Gibson Custom Shop, Fender Custom Shop. I think the lines visually have been starting to blur for a long time, and I feel like the guitars are finally really getting closer. I mean, they're not as close, but they're not perfect.
Yeah.
But they're really close to their vintage counterparts. Like, what do you think about, that? Like, do you think that how well do you think they're doing? I mean, I know you have a stake in some of this, but like, what is your thought on the current state of like the custom shop world and the recreations of these vintage guitars? I
can only tell you from my personal experience. I work with I work with both Fender and Gibson on certain projects. So when you go into a project like we we recreated the high-powered Tweed Twin. Yeah. Okay. So, okay, let's just build it. Stan Cody took one of my original high-powered 59 Tweed Twins. We measured the box because we figured out the first prototype, which he made not with Fender parts. He made it with an aftermarket cabinet maker and stuff that he had laying around. We figured out that the aftermarket cabinet maker didn't have the right measurements for the high-powered Twin. The cabinets were bigger. Mm-hmm.
Which is a big deal.
Which is a big deal. Yeah. A lot of power in a small box. That's my jam.
Yeah.
Because the bigger the box, the more you're just not getting the focus.
Yeah.
I think that's the word I'm looking for, the focus. Anyway, once Fender made the box, and then I was like, okay, this is go back to 59, just do it the way. Can't do it. There are regulations, there are parts. We have to have a tube cage. Because in 1959, the general population was smart enough not to take their bare hand, stick it behind an amplifier, and grab a molten glass bulb that's glowing at 600 degrees.
Well, that was a normal thing back then.
In 2016 or 2017, we had to put certain precautions. It's the lady at McDonald's with the coffee that was too hot. It's all about lawsuits. And so you have to make some compromises on the gear. You just, if you're a boutique maker, you're off the radar. You can source every single part online and transformers and this and that, and you can make a spot on close enough copy of whatever amp you're looking to recreate. If you're doing it in a large scale, it's impossible. So when people rag on Fender and Gibson, I am very sympathetic to the fact that they are doing it. They're aware of what the old stuff is. Gibson has a collection of it I've seen. Fender has a collection of it. They are well aware of what they did. They have to really thread the needle and get it as close as they possibly can with environmental regulations and manufacturing regulations. And quite frankly, some of these parts and the companies who made these parts, the OEM operators, their clients, they don't exist anymore.
Right. So
they're having to go, well, this was a military switch for a B-52 bomber. Well, you're going to have to go back and either go find 500,000 of them in a warehouse somewhere in Utah, or you have to recreate it as close as you possibly can, AKA for the guitars to be cost prohibitive and get the price points down, you have to outsource to China. So your pots, your CTS pots that were made here and wherever they were made are now coming from China. So the tolerances are not as good. So the summation of the guitar itself, that's either coming from the custom shop of Gibson and the custom shop of Fender, may have some things that are not quite accurate to the original spec, not because they are not aware of it. It's because they're just trying to do their best and make it as close as they possibly can. And they've gotten way better in the last decade. Both companies have gotten way better.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just bought a custom shop Les Paul R9
from Uncle Norm.
Uncle Norm, Mr. Tim Pierce helped me pick it out, and it's unbelievable. And the thing I like about the custom shop stuff from Fender and from Gibson is, it gets you, I think, in the ballpark of the real thing of whatever it is that you're buying the custom shop version of for a price that is actually more feasible for most players out there. And for someone like me, I'm going to take this thing on the road. I'm going to gig with it. And, if I owned one of those, that's going to stay at home and it's going to be used on session. Why? Well, I think you're braver than I am.
Okay, I am brave.
Or maybe you have better insurance than I do.
I go through heritage. But here's the thing. I've had these things in the baked potato. I've had these things in jams. I went and sat in with Mike Henderson one night at the Bluebird 58V. I just look at it as if I took care of my reissues when I was playing reissues and nothing ever happened. I just had a protocol. then nothing's going to happen. I'm not worried about these being stolen at all. Not a single thing worried. Not theft is not my biggest worry. My biggest worry is fire.
Yeah.
And my biggest worry is if the truck catches on fire or my house catches on fire, it all goes boom. We're not coming back. If somebody steals PJ, what are you gonna do with it?
Yeah.
It's gonna come back around eventually, and be like, I'm like, hi, what's this? 85488. It's just, and it's got a fingerprint. It's got a.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? It's so I'm not worried. That doesn't worry me. So, I have when I play an old Les Paul, live, I'm just sitting in whatever session. I have these old Series 1 protector cases. We do a line of the Carlton cases, which are great. I mean, you could run them over with a damn car, so you're not gonna lose. You're not gonna worry about it getting broken. So you can bring your 67 SG on the road. It's not gonna get fucked up.
Well, for you,
unless you're throwing it around.
I think it's also part of your brand, though. Like
it is.
It's part of going to see. I saw you in Atlanta in 2000. My dad and I. It was Cobb Galleria Center. It must have been 2010,
right?
Maybe. And for me, that was the first time I had seen or heard a burst.
Right.
And so that's part of what's I do really appreciate that you are out here and not just sort of the more traditional collector, someone who's buying these and hiding them away in a private collection. You're actually out there on the road using them and playing them, using them on sessions, getting them out there for people to hear them and see them.
Yeah,
which is super cool. I was on the cruise in 2017 with Muddy Magnolias.
Yeah,
you had all the stuff on the boat. It's like
that was the time Norm still talks about that. That's when it rained on us, because it normally rains on us on our sets. I don't know why, it just does. I'm like a black cloud that follows the boat. And I had Spot. I had my old basically Spot I sold to buy this, what we're sitting in. I had Spot and it started to rain. I'm like, what am I gotta finish the damn song. So we're like, things raining. It's raining on the 59. It's like,
yeah, but at that point, it also kind of becomes part of the providence of the guitar.
Yeah, and here's the thing: it's like when we play at any given theater, now the rig is obnoxious. The amp rig is obnoxious, and I'll even admit it's fucking obnoxious. And if I was a troll, I'd troll myself because the amp rig is fucking obnoxious. But it sounds great.
Yeah, I don't imagine
the amp shanty sounds great, and. But I'll come out at like 7:30. We were a hard eight band, and I'll come down 7:30, kind of just talk to Big D, my tech, and we just watch. And I just watch people, like groups of 3 or 4 guys that come out, and all they're doing is doing like this, and they got their phones on wide, and they're kind of like, and I go, D, they just want, they don't want a picture of me. They want a picture of the Dumbles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there's 3 of them up there now, hence obnoxious. And I started thinking, I was like, well, it's just an amp. And I said, a lot of people have never been that close to one.
Right.
And it's indelibly linked to this thing where you just like, I wonder what Joe's playing. It's like, if you see a flying V, it's a real flying V. If it's but I nicked that from, I nicked that from Rick Nielsen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And because Rick Nielsen played real stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, that's the coolest thing in the world. Like, look at Rick. He's got these Sunburst Les Pauls. He's got this Explorer. He's got this and that. And, there's been a bunch of people. Like, historically, Robin Ford has always played old guitars on the road. And Dan Toller, the late, great Dan Toller, I was 6 years old. And I saw my first Sunburst Les Paul in anger at a Dickie Betts and Greg Allman concert in Rome, New York. And I'm like, that's it.
Yeah.
It never, it's just like, I want to see, it makes me excited when you go to Austin, Texas, and these guys have been around for 40, 50 years and they still got that 57 Strat. I mean, and it's like, that's what I want to see.
I got the Dumble thing when I saw Robin in Atlanta. It was one of the last shows I saw before the pandemic, before the shutdown. Played City Winery, so relatively small room, sitting close enough to the stage where I can hear stage volume. He had his Dumble there.
The one.
Yeah. And when I heard Robin play his Dumble and in that room, I got it. It's like, okay, now I understand. Because I've played.
Was he cutting it with something else, or you just have the single Dumble?
Just single Dumble.
Okay, yeah.
And it sounded unbelievable. Now, it's not the amp,
It's him.
not the guitar, it's him, right?
I've seen him with a super and a twin, and it sounds like Robin Ford.
Yeah,
sure.
He's one of my favorite players, and it just, but I get it. That's what made me get it too.
Yeah, it's like, oh, it's the way I think about it is like we're talking about a game of like a few percentage points here. Like, okay, if you had to quantify the percentage difference between a really truly great ringer R9 versus that,
5%.
5%. But guys like you, guys like Robin, live in that 5%.
Well, it's you if they're the daily drivers,
Sure.
You start to understand the nuances of what you can extract from that 5%, 10%. There's some old 59s that are just like, man, it's like punching sand. I owned one. I was like, man, it's like, I got to get rid of it. And the person who bought it, like, they love it. They think it sounds great. But for me, that wasn't the one that connected. And then there's some reissues that just bloom. It's like, it's killer. The Dumble thing is it's rarefied air because there's so few of them. I got it right off the bat because I like articulation that's extremely quick. Like my ideal tone is saturation, overdrive, but a recovery rate of an acoustic guitar. Mm-hmm. So it's just bang, boom, because I have no legato, zero. It's all pick. Once I figured that out, that's why I've historically always liked Fender amps, because they're little cleaner. Until I discovered the Marshall Jubilee, I go, this will work with EVs, okay. And then you start pairing them together. But I still like the recovery, a real quick recovery, whether it's a Dumble or a twin. And the sag is my kryptonite. Mm. And once I heard I owned my first Dumble, and I saved up a lot of money, and we paid a lot of money for it, and I started using it with the rig, and I go, that's what's been missing in this whole chain forever, is that quick recovery. And it's almost like putting tacks on a piano. Mm. And it's got these little pings on each note. Now, when you're having a good night, there is no better feeling than that, because that shit is articulate. And you're like, man, this is great. When you're having a bad night, you want to dump out of that amp faster than anything.
You can't hide behind it.
That's why I have three settings. I have Marshall Fender, Marshall 2 Dumbles on the overdrive, and then Marshall Dumble clean driven, like a Larry Carlton setting. And that's the most honest. So, but it also sounds the best. But I'll dump out of that quick if the chops are not there. Yeah. Because you're just going to be like, ugh.
I got the Dumble thing working when I was working at Carter. One of yours at some point.
The Hoyt?
It was a combo.
Yeah, the Hoyt Axton. I still have that.
Okay, yeah. I played it.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. Okay.
There's a thing here. Oh, yeah.
Well, the thing is, it's like when you talk about people that clone Dumbles, mm-hmm. and there's, it's been a minute, but there used to be like, there's people who come out, I make the best Dumble clone, better than the Dumbles. I'm like, okay, great. Like the Flex. My first question is, you make a clone of what amp?
Right.
They're all different.
Yeah.
And most of my original Dumbles came with L-Tech speakers. And they now have Celestians. Mm-hmm. Because I'll tell you this, the amp changes if you put an EV in the amps, if you run a Celestion, if you run an L-Tech, Eminence, the amp itself changes character. So it's so indelibly linked to what he tuned it. Robin he was using Celestions. And I like what Celestions do with Dumbles. They give it a little bit of they just give it a little bit of a sag.
Sure.
And it just a little bit dirtier and fatter, in my opinion. The EVs are cool, but they're exactly what that head is churning out. There's no coloration.
Yeah.
And L-Techs just give it a spike in the high end that wasn't for me.
Yeah.
So you just have to, like, the Hoyt came with an Altec, but Hoyt was also an acoustic player.
Oh,
The
okay.
Hoyt Axton amp has a Dumble direct box in the back in which he would play acoustic guitar.
Huh.
So I never really understood why Hoyt would need an overdrive special to play an Ovation Balladeer, but I didn't care because it's one of the coolest amps I own.
Yeah. I've played a handful of them, and there are definitely some that you know immediately. I can't play this. It doesn't work.
Because of probably whoever that amp was originally voiced for, and you are completely different players looking for different things out of an amplifier. Yeah. So
Generally, you find, like, especially the early, like, my favorite is the early 80s Dumbles. It's predominantly where most of mine. Hoyt's at 84, the one I just got, the blonde one. It looks like Robin's, and it's right in between Larry's and Robin's. I'm like, don't listen with your eyes because it looks like it. It's a good one. I got another 84 black with a Vox grill. I like the early 80s. Generally, that to me is what it's like the LA session guys. Like it's the meat and potatoes of the Dumble era, where he was building for Carlton and Robin and Dean Parks or whoever was having him. And if you look at a lot of those players of that era, they had lighter touches, and so when you just back off the attack on the right hand, or if you're Carlos Alomar, your left hand, he had multiple Dumbles. They start to sound like those tones that you associate with the Dumble, because he was going, okay, Alexander would be like, this is how you play. So he would adjust the recovery rate, and there's trim pots inside. I wouldn't dare fuck with him because you're like, oh my God, amp's never gonna be the same. But there's trim pots inside, and it's like it's like there's gain and all these weird things that are going on. And the guy was a genius.
Oh yeah.
Whether you like the sound of that or not, the guy was a genius, and not only a genius amp designer and builder, but from a design point of view, like he came up with that look that everybody goes, wow, that's cool.
Yeah, the aesthetic is unmistakable. It's perfect.
If he was building the same sounding amps using Stromberg Carlson, industrial amps, I don't think we'd be sitting here having this discussion. But he came up with this aesthetic, and the suede, the Vox grill, the trim, the way the dials were laid out, all that. It's
weird fonts.
The fonts,
the weird fonts, and just the kind of way he did business and the paperwork that had to be. I mean, the whole thing added to this great mystique, because if it was about the money for him, and he would have mass produced those things in a heartbeat. But he was so like hell bent on keeping the quality control and this thing tight that he never monetized it to the level of where it could have gone.
Right. And we'll never have anyone like that again.
Never again. Never again. He's one of a kind. Yeah. One of a kind.
Well, Joe, thanks for having us, man.
Thanks for coming to my house. I'm glad we don't have any today. The humidity is at a certain point. Like sometimes you get these high pitched squeals. Like if it's a little bit too humid, that's the second hands on the clocks rubbing against the glass.
Oh
cool.
my gosh!
That's
so
awesome.
we didn't have any high pitched.
Well, again, it's good that my high end is gone.
Right. Yeah,
yours is probably gone, so we wouldn't have been
4K.
able to hear it.
Mine's my I have huge dips in 4K both ears.
Oh,
you know why?
Dips. Okay, you're not rolled off at 4K because
I'm not rolled off at 4K. They're dips, but they're like extreme dips. And you know what it is? It's cymbals.
Yeah,
it's not anything I did.
Cymbals.
Fucking drummers.
Well, like I said, go catch Joe on tour.
And by the way, congratulations on your new adventure.
Thank you.
Premier Guitar. This is the flagship episode.
Yeah. Thanks for.
So if it gets canceled after one episode, you know it's me.
Awesome.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.